in the face of Superman.
Welcome, everyone. This is Russ Scalzo, Chronicles of the End Times. Thank you for being with me today. Thankful for all of you who are listening in. Over 6,000 cities across this planet. And I pray that you are being used of God and touched of God and strengthened by Him this very day. Today we have a special podcast. A former U.S. Marshal, Michael Schroeder, a longtime friend of mine, husband, father, and a powerful testimony for Jesus Christ. Mike, it's great to have you here. You've had an amazing journey, and we can't wait to hear about it today. So I guess the first question I want to ask is, what influenced you and what made you want to become a U.S. Marshal?
I've always had a desire to serve the country, serve America, so to speak. I guess it goes back to me as a little kid watching all these John Wayne movies and so forth. And even when I gave my heart to the Lord back when I was 19, that desire to serve didn't change. And I felt at the time that serving law enforcement, federal law enforcement, I can make that impact. And this was at the time of the war on drugs and so forth. So I wanted to basically get into the wars, so to speak. So, yeah, that's where I was at.
You know, there's a lot of people that they say they run from the action, and then there's people that run to the action. And I've always kind of known you as a guy who runs to the action. To become a U.S. Marshal, there's a lot involved, right?
Yes, absolutely. So and just a little background on the U.S. Marshal Service. The first thing I always say is we're not the Air Marshals, a totally different agency. But the United States Marshals is the oldest federal law enforcement agency in the country. In fact, President George Washington appointed the first 13 U.S. Marshals back in 1789. And actually, that's where our roots are. And the beauty of our agency is that we're actually stated and embedded in the Constitution of the United States, actually. Our creation, the Office of the U.S. Marshal. And not to bore everybody here, all your listeners, with some history here, but, of the three branches of government, the executive, the legislative, and the judicial, we fall under the judicial branch. Yes, we also fall in the executive, but that's another discussion. But in essence, the Constitution created the Judiciary Act of 1789, and Congress established the office of federal judges, the judiciary, obviously, from the U.S. Supreme Court all the way down through appeals courts, appellate courts, and district courts and magistrate courts. Well, the founders and the writers of the Constitution said, okay, it's one thing to have the judiciary and all these federal judges out there, but they'll have their powers, but we need an instrument to enforce those powers. Hence, the Office of the Marshal was created, and that's why we kind of fall within the footprint of the judiciary throughout our country. And with that, what did that entail? First and foremost, we have not to handicap the judiciary. Hence, this Office of the Marshal, these folks have broad arrest powers because they not only jurisdiction in one spot, but they needed jurisdiction around the whole country. Our primary mission, obviously, is the protection of the federal judiciary and also the operation of trials, the protection of the judges, the U.S. attorneys, the prosecutors, anybody and everybody that's involved in the criminal justice process of our country. To include protecting witnesses, yes, to even include defendants, getting defendants to trial, to court, also, housing federal inmates, federal prisoners. Alongside that is there are times that obviously people are wanted by the federal government, but they're on the run. So the U.S. Marshals, because of their broad arrest powers, also have their second mission is the apprehension of federal fugitives, folks that are on the run that are out there. And that hasn't changed since 1789. And we have that specialty of, hunting people, hunting man, the worst of the worst that are out there. And then there's a lot of other things. You've heard of the Witness Protection Program. I'm sure a lot of your listeners have seen a lot of movies, and we're responsible for that. The U.S. Marshals haven't lost one single witness that is in the program since its creation in the early 70s. We do everything from that. We assist the military with respect to escorting nuclear missiles to and from bases, especially out in the Midwest. arrest, because, again, we bring that broad arrest powers, we bring that broad law enforcement presence. And, again, amongst other things, the seizure and managing of assets. For example, if the Drug Enforcement Administration arrests a big drug dealer, all their assets, hence, are believed to be, obviously purchased through drug proceeds. The U.S. Marshal Service is responsible for managing all that during the course of that individual's process in the federal judicial system.
That's amazing. I mean, it's a lot, especially the 1789 thing.
Yes.
I didn't realize it was that old.
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing. There's a lot of things that U.S. Marshals do that I wasn't aware of. There's lots of sections or parts of it. So when you come on board, you're a young guy, U.S. Marshal, just coming on. You've had your training, and what are your first assignment? What do they usually do?
Going back to that, Russ, the training. So we, all prospective Deputy United States Marshals, and that's our title actually, if selected, obviously through a very lengthy application process, interview and physicals and so forth, those candidates get sent down to our academy down at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center down in Georgia. And that is a 16 to 18-week training. Again, it's rule of law, evidence, and then obviously there's the physical aspect of it, a lot of running, especially in the Georgia heat. But there's obviously extensive firearms training, extensive tactical training, because obviously there are people out there that don't want to be arrested. So we have to bring a certain skill set to the door, so to speak, with respect to that. So once a candidate has successfully completed that training, they get assigned to various offices, or it could be any office throughout the United States and all 50 states, actually. And I was fortunate enough to my first duty station, as they are called, was up in the what's referred to as the Southern District of New York, which is headquartered in Manhattan. All the states are divided into these judicial districts. New York, a large state, is divided into 4 districts. So I happen to be in the Southern District, which is Manhattan, and oversees the Bronx, and obviously up in the White Plains area as well. But yeah, so that's kind of where I cut my teeth there, right there in the Big Apple, which back in 1994, which I was very fortunate because you get a lot of exposure, obviously, to a lot of these things that we've talked about and will be talking about working in the big city.
The first things that come to mind to a lot of people, I know comes to my mind, is obviously the attacks on the World Trade Center.
Correct.
The first one that, was, thank God, wasn't successful at that point in time, but caused a lot of damage. And then, of course, 9/11. So,
yes.
I mean, you were right there in the heart of a lot of activity. Must be some pretty tense moments involved in all that, being the fact that you have to run down some of these guys, and you never know what you're going to find, right? I mean, that's got to be
correct.
A little nerve-wracking, right? You're trained, and you know what you're doing, and you're with a crew that knows what they're doing, but still, there's always the surprise, that you try to avoid.
Correct. Yes. To your point, Russ, going after fugitives is an extremely dangerous objective. Okay. We can have all the training. You can have all the equipment. You can have all the weaponry. You can have all the people there. At the end of the day, you do not know what's on the other side of that door. And that's what I mean is where, we're going after folks that are in their places of residences, albeit an apartment or a trailer or a single family home or maybe at their job. It can go, as we say, it can go south on us very quickly. That's why the training is so important. It runs the gamut from white collar criminals all the way to terrorists, to gang members, to mobsters, and everybody in between. You just never know. And you think that you're going after the most violent individual, which you could be.
Right.
Turns out to be the most quietest arrest to be. Or you can go in after somebody that's wanted because they violated their probation, and it turns out to be a firefight.
It's a lot to live with, the guys that you're with as well and your team. We live our daily lives, most of us, unknowing of what's actually going on to protect us and to protect our families and to keep the nation that we love the way it is. So the interesting part of this, for those of you who are listening to Chronicles of the End Times, we focus on Christ and his coming and living for him. And sometimes the challenges and the blessings that are all part of life. Now we bring in the fact that you love the Lord, you're a born-again Christian, you love Jesus, and you're now into this world. When did you actually come to Christ in your life?
in September of 87, I was 19, and that's when I gave my heart to the Lord. Very blessed and thankful to my girlfriend at the time and her father just praying over me. Eventually, I would marry that girl. So now at age 19, I was in college, though, and as time went on, but I still had this desire. I wanted to get in the game, so to speak, and again, pursue law enforcement. I actually was on a track to go in the military in college, but once I had gotten saved, all of a sudden that kind of desire changed quickly, but I still had this desire to serve. And upon graduation, I had, took so many tests in law enforcement, from Secret Service, DEA, the FBI, even state and local law enforcement.
Wow.
But at this point, as a young Christian, though I wanted to serve, and I emphasize the word I, in that at the end of the day, I would always say, though, Lord, it's where you want me to be. It may be a total 180-degree turn that you want me to do. And I always maintain that. To that point, I was, upon graduation, thinking I was going to get hired immediately. That wasn't the case. I graduated college in 1989, and I was, just spinning my wheels, so to speak, jobs, around town and so forth. And as time went on, there was a frustration part of me, was that here a year, 2 years, 3 years goes by, and there's nothing going on. And I'm asking the Lord, what do you want me to do? I had so many applications out, and I was actually running neck and neck with Orlando Police Department in Florida, because I like Disney, and then obviously the U.S. Marshal Service. And I just remember going to my job at the time. I was working security at a local sporting goods store, and I was just so frustrated. I said, Lord, I just threw my hands up in the air. Literally, I says, Lord, you let me know where you want to be. So I just surrendered the whole situation to him. Within 2 weeks, I got a letter from the Marshal Service,
Wow.
And that's kind of what it took. It was just that surrendering. So anyway, but now I'm going into the Marshal Service. I'm starting out in a huge office like New York City. I was going to and would be exposed to a lot of things as a question about being a Christian in that type of environment. Yes, it was challenging. It was challenging on both sides of the law, so to speak, with respect to, the folks that you're going after to arrest, or you're handling as a prisoner, escorting them up to court, or protecting them as a witness and forth. These are extremely dangerous people. Yeah. You see a side of life, a side of humanity that the regular, person on the street does not see. True evil, and I don't say that loosely, especially, I personally, just because of the trials at the time, there was a lot of terrorism trials going on at the time. So we had a lot of exposure to Al-Qaeda terrorists. Literally, you can sense the evil coming out of these people. Go into some of these homes, some of these apartments, if you're going after a fugitive, and you see the filth. I distinctly remember seeing rats in a kid's bedroom,
Wow.
with the child, in the crib, and just living in squalor like this, it definitely weighs heavily on you. And there, how I would handle that with the Lord is, and again, it goes back to the Lord and equipping me spiritually and being able to process that. A lot of these experiences, through spending time with the Lord and, and sharing with, guys like yourself, Russ, and, or my father-in-law or my wife. And then when I said about the other side of the law is like the folks you're working with, all right, the other marshals or other police officers. Believe it or not, there's a lot of work to be done, but there's also a lot of playing to be done, all work and no play, makes a deputy a dull boy, so to speak. So, so there was that temptation at times, right? They're, after a day at work, they want to go out, they want to, hit the bars. And, but after being exposed to that, when I would be telling them, no, now I'm not that, the Bible says, he gives favor, right? So there came a point in time getting beyond the jokes, they would call me Father Mike and all that stuff and all the nicknames. It is what it is. You got to have a thick skin working in law enforcement, but preacher man, I would be called. But at the end of the day, though, there was respect for me where it was getting to a point where, and I'm not just focusing on alcohol, but it would get to the point where I'd be at maybe a retirement party at a pub or a tavern there, and right out of the gate, guys are like ordering me a soda already. You know what I mean? So they know, not to pressure me and that type of stuff. So it all comes down to my relationship with the Lord and making that time. We have a gym in the office. You have to maintain a level of fitness because there's times, you're going to be maybe rolling around with somebody trying to get somebody handcuffed. But you can spend an hour and a half in that gym before work. The question is, how much time am I spending with the Lord? Because that's where the strength is. And that's where a lot of the stuff I was able to share with the Lord, and he equips me and saw his hand throughout my whole career.
That's part one of Mike's amazing story, and some of the best parts are still to come. So don't hesitate. Click on part two and continue the journey. I know you'll be blessed by it. This is Russ Scalzo for Chronicles of the End Times. Keep looking up. The King is coming.